Why do people even visit San Francisco? In this video, I'm gonna show you why. We have to start with the most famous and quintessential San Francisco landmarks. There's a reason they're so iconic. Starting with the Golden Gate Bridge. If you've never seen it with your own eyes, it is so much more incredible than seeing it on TV. It truly took our breath away. So cool to finally see it in person, especially from all the different viewpoints like Fort Point. One day we rented bikes and biked across the bridge. I think that's definitely the best way to do it, because then you can visit Battery Spencer on the north side of the bridge. You have to come here for this iconic lookout and those postcard-worthy views. On our bikes, we also explored the Presidio and Tunnel Tops. This is a massive, beautiful park with trails and viewpoints all over. Here we also found the life-sized Yoda statue. Nearby is the Palace of Fine Arts. Built in 1915, this is another spot with absolutely stunning architecture. It's this lovely, calm area to explore with these massive Greco-Roman inspired towering columns. There's also some great beaches in this area, Baker Beach being one of the most popular, especially at sunset. As you can see, it's got stunning views of the Golden Gate Bridge. We also visited the parking lot at the top of Marshall's Beach to try and get another cool view of the bridge, but alas, in classic San Francisco style, we were blessed by Carl. That's the name of the fog here. Honestly, I can't even be mad. I feel like if the fog doesn't block your view of the bridge at least once or twice, you didn't really visit San Francisco. You could keep going, and there's incredible trails and hiking all over. Land's End is another great spot for rugged coastline views, and there's also the Sutro Baths, a really interesting landmark to check out. One of the things I loved most about visiting San Francisco was all the different neighborhoods throughout the city. They were all like their own little diverse pockets of architecture and parks and viewpoints. Of course, we have the picture-perfect Painted Ladies houses at Alamo Square. Painted Ladies? Besides the Golden Gate Bridge, they're probably one of the most famous landmarks here in San Francisco. Still standing since they were built in the late 1800s, they're pretty iconic and also known as the Full House houses.
Are you?
Yeah. And as an elementary school-aged kid in the 90s, I definitely had a bit of a fangirl moment seeing them in person. They really are beautiful and intricate once you see them up close. And you can even take a tour of the inside of one of these houses by one of the current owners. Here are some other favorite spots we loved for viewpoints. We've got Coit Tower up on Telegraph Hill for amazing views of the city. And also throughout the city, there's so many steps and stairways that connect different streets. One of our favorites was on Montgomery Street for a really cool shot of the Transamerica Pyramid building. A true hidden gem, though, was Tank Hill, a short but steep staircase that led to this amazing little viewpoint with 360-degree views of the entire city and the bay. Twin Peaks is another park nearby for views like this. It's a lot more popular, but Tank Hill was quiet and peaceful and there was no one else around. Also, we didn't have a car while we were here in the city, so we saw a lot of these areas by taking a city tour in an old-school Volkswagen bus with a local guide. It was so fun and the perfect way to spend a few hours at the beginning of our trip. Our tour guide, Chad, was about as authentic California as you can get. He knew the city inside and out and was awesome to hang out with all afternoon. I left a link in the description and comments if you want to book the same tour that we took. Welcome to the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood. This is the birthplace of 1960s counterculture. If you're like me and weren't alive in 1967 for the Summer of Love, you can still experience all the hippies and psychedelic vibes here today.
Where it's always 420.
Our tour also took us through the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood, but it was such a vibe that we wanted to go back and explore a little more on our own. Here you can check out all the great vintage stores and record shops, cafes and breweries and tie-dye shops, as well as the former homes of musicians like the Grateful Dead house, the former residence of Janis Joplin, and legendary Jimi Hendrix. A tour of Alcatraz is an absolute must-do. This is the famous maximum security prison that once housed some of the most notorious criminals. We opted for the night tour, which I heard was the better way to go, and I can absolutely attest to that. It's worth every penny. Tickets were $56 per person. The ferry ride is only about 12 minutes long, but I think our total experience was a little over 3 hours. On the island itself, you'll start with a self-guided audio tour. I would not want to be in here. I usually find these types of tours a little dry, but this one was very well done. There were real stories from former prisoners, and as you walk the cell blocks, the immersion factor was pretty chilling. There was also a cell door demonstration where they slammed shut the famous cell doors, and to Chris and I, that was worth the price of admission alone right there. After the tour, you have time to explore around the prison and the island on your own time. Standing on the rock, looking out onto the bay and the majestic San Francisco skyline, it's really easy to forget that you have your back to one of the most infamous prisons in the world. Stay tuned though. We're making a dedicated video of our experience on The Rock. Back to more neighborhoods, the oldest and largest Chinatown in North America is here in San Francisco, established in the 1850s. It's basically a city within a city. The best way to experience it is coming hungry and entering through the Dragon's Gate. Inside, you'll find 24 blocks of hustle and bustle, most of it taking place along Grant Avenue. You could easily get lost in here for a full day or at least a few hours. Chris and I wandered up and down the streets and alleyways, visited shops, food markets.
Those look so good.
Temples, murals, and lanterns. We brought our film cameras here and let loose.
Do you like Chinatown?
Yeah. Here's a few places that I recommend you check out. Eastern Bakery is the oldest bakery that's been here for 100 years. We had to try the steamed pork buns and custard tarts. Then there's the Golden Gate Fortune Cookie Factory down Ross Alley. Allegedly, this is the first place to have ever made fortune cookies here in North America, and you can still watch them make them by hand and try a fresh sample. And of course, buy some to take home. You can also customize your own fortune cookies for a special gift. I recommend trying dim sum. It's typically enjoyed around brunch or in the afternoon into the early evening. It's basically small bite-sized dishes. We had dim sum at Hang Ah Tea Room, which was the first place to ever offer dim sum in the United States in 1920. The food was quite tasty. I would say it's definitely the full 3.5-star experience though, but that's not a bad thing. It's a little more authentic this way. And one night we ended up at Lipo, an 85-year-old dive bar full of history. They're also known for their Chinese Mai Tais, tested and recommended by Anthony Bourdain himself. Next to Chinatown is North Beach, San Francisco's version of Little Italy. Pizza, pasta, gelato. We could have spent 4 full days just eating in North Beach. But most importantly,
Espresso.
We had the most delightful latte and macchiato one morning at Cafe Trieste. This is a historic and legendary Italian establishment for espresso here in the city since the 1950s. Nearby Washington Square is a beautiful park for sunshine and hangouts. North Beach really comes alive, though, in the early evenings with great cocktail bars. We loved Vesuvio Cafe. But walking through the neighborhood, there was tons of live music and everybody hanging out outside at the little bistro tables enjoying appies and drinks. We actually took a walking food tour of both Chinatown and North Beach. This was the perfect mix of learning about all the history and culture and importance of these neighborhoods, all while getting to sample all kinds of food, drinks, herbal teas, snacks, and desserts. Again, check the links below for the exact tours that we booked. Then we have Fisherman's Wharf, definitely an area for tourists, but honestly, there were some great spots for seafood, sourdough, and Irish coffee. Pier 39 is by far the most touristy part of Fisherman's Wharf. It's full of chain restaurants and some rides and street performers. I think unless you have small children, it's worth it to just come by and say you saw it. It's beyond cheesy touristy. I did like the sea lions though. They're usually sunbathing and making noise at the end of the pier, so it's worth the walk to go through and find them for a few minutes. But as you walk a little further west, there's some much better spots. The Musée Mécanique is a place full of vintage and antique coin-operated arcade-style games.
That's cheating. Better
eat your Wheaties. That's hard.
Most of them are from the early 20th century. It was actually insane how old some of these pieces were and just how much stuff was in here. It's free admission and most games are 25 to 75 cents each. So of course we had to try out a couple, and this place was way more fun than we were expecting.
Hot stuff.
You're sizzling hot.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Across the street from here is Boudin Bakery. You have to try their famous sourdough. It's made from the same strain of yeast that's been nurtured since 1849. There's quite a story about saving this sourdough starter. And Chris really loved the bread chairlift. You have to stop in for clam chowder in a sourdough bread bowl. Perfect fuel for climbing those steep streets. Where Chris had to make his own switchbacks to save his quads. Since we're in Fisherman's Wharf, I wanted to quickly share where we stayed. We stayed at the Alton Hotel, and for first-time visitors, I thought this was the perfect spot because of its location. It also had great amenities like free bikes to use, record players in the room, and there was also an evening social for hotel guests with complimentary wine and beer. This wasn't a sponsored stay. I did my own research and ended up choosing this spot. I booked it through planin.com because it was a great deal. I'll leave a link to my full review of this hotel on my Planin profile if you want to check it out for yourself. Our hotel was also right across the street from Surisan. This was amazing Korean fusion cuisine. We had the most incredible breakfast here one day. You've got to try the Millionaire's Bacon if you stop in. Next is the Buena Vista, a must-visit 100-year-old time machine in the heart of San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf.
We're now at the Buena Vista Cafe. We've been told to try the Irish coffee. Apparently, they were the inventors of it here in the United States. But this isn't just your regular morning coffee.
This starts with a stemmed glass kept warm with hot water, before pouring coffee over 2 sugar cubes, then making ample room for a very generous measure of Irish whiskey. That's topped with lightly whipped heavy cream. And yes, it absolutely tastes as good as it looks. They pump these out in huge quantities for a packed bar all day long from open to close. This place is an institution in and of itself, but they also serve up an amazing breakfast too. The vibe here at Buena Vista is unmatched, so needless to say, we made it our home multiple nights for a couple decafs and or a pint of Guinness for Chris. We loved this place and can't wait to go back. Riding a cable car is a pretty iconic experience and like taking a ride back in time. They're the world's last manually operated cable car system, and they still work the exact same way they did in 1873. Watching the operators run these cars with all the old levers and pedals is truly incredible. It's like an underground ski lift that the cars grip onto and then get pulled all over town. But you've got to get in line early and be prepared to wait if you want to do the classic experience of hanging off the edge. Each ride is $8, or you can also buy a day pass for $13. As a side note, the Cable Car Museum is actually super interesting for a quick visit to learn all about how these cars operate and how the cables run under the streets. It's also free admission. Since we're on the topic of transportation, you've got to take a ride in a Waymo. These are the autonomous robot taxis. That's right, there's no driver. Here's a POV of what our first time was like.
Whoa.
It's crazy.
Let me get this door for you. Welcome.
There is no driver.
Who's in charge of this thing? Good morning, Chris. Wow. Okay, what do we do? Start ride.
Hello from Waymo. As we get going, just give us 1 minute to cover a few This experience may feel futuristic.
Okay, so this was a little weird at first, but they are so cool. And perfect for us introverts out there because then we don't have to make small talk with the driver. The Waymos navigate the tight streets of this city perfectly. Their radar sees every vehicle and pedestrian around them. The chill music was awesome, or you can even play your own music. And except for on a busy Saturday night, they were usually cheaper by $1 or $2 compared to Uber or Lyft. Back to Fisherman's Wharf, one more spot is Ghirardelli Square, because yes, this famous chocolate company started here in San Francisco. It's a massive brick plaza with shops and restaurants and cafes. There's even a brewery in here. Plus, there's also great views of Alcatraz up here too. We had a lovely sunny afternoon and enjoyed some local brews, and of course had to buy some chocolate. We wanted to dine one night on seafood, and Skoma's was recommended to us by some locals. They've got their own fishing boat, and they serve up fresh catches of the day in this upscale, casual waterfront nook. The vibe here was amazing. We're right on the water, eating a fantastic seafood dinner. The recommendations definitely delivered. And we also met multiple people that say if they only eat at one restaurant when they come up to the city, this is it. I get it. Another must-do is the Ferry Building. This is a food market paradise. If you can time it right, it's extra fun to visit on a Saturday morning for the farmers market. And then on the inside of the Ferry Building, it's full of shops and cafes and all kinds of amazing food. I tried a charcoal latte at Red Bay Coffee. After this, definitely stroll along the Embarcadero waterfront promenade. You can check out all the different piers for great views. With the Golden Gate Bridge fading into the fog behind us, we made our way for greener pastures. If you like wine or want some fresh air, a Napa Valley trip is an easy and essential part of any San Francisco itinerary. Wineries are only about an hour away, and the views all over are beautiful. With hundreds of wineries to choose from in Napa Valley, how do you choose where to visit? Well, Chris and I chose Beringer Vineyards as our first winery because that was the very first bottle of wine we ever shared together. Napa Valley is most famous and therefore a little more expensive, so since we had a car and had a couple of days to cruise around, we also explored some wineries in adjacent Sonoma County, which is a little more casual. And Sonoma itself is beautiful and there's lots of great restaurants too. But there are also great winery day trips that you can book so that you don't have to worry about driving and making your own winery itinerary. I actually really like this Merlot. Do you want to try some?
No, thank you.
No, if anybody orders Merlot, I'm leaving. I am not drinking any fucking Merlot!
On the way back into town to drop off the rental car, we had to try out one of the most famous roads in San Francisco, Lombard Street. It's known as one of the crookedest streets in the world. Chris loves driving the twisties, and I think he got a little more than he bargained for here. It's definitely pretty wacky, but I would say it's worth seeing, especially if you can get there early in the morning or at a time when there's not too many people around.
This is pretty fun. Yeah, everybody looks so dorky when they were driving down this, and I get it.
We drove it in the afternoon during the week, and there was no lineup to drive it. If you're planning a trip to San Francisco, I put together a travel planning cheat sheet that you can download, which has tons of information, or you can check out my blog where I've got some itineraries and more travel tips. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hell yeah,
Reaction?
dude. Yes.